Protests broke out across the country following the release of footage showing Memphis police beating 29-year-old Tyre Nichols. He later died in the hospital. He was sent to the hospital by these cops who had beaten him, and he died 3 days later. He was in critical condition prior to that. The protesters are demanding much needed police reform, but Representative Maxine Waters says members of her own Democratic Party seem to be standing in the way. So let's talk a little bit about that. Here's Maxine Waters on MSNBC discussing who she seems to have a problem with in the Democratic Party.
We have the Criminal Justice Reform Act that we're still pushing. We were not able to get it in the last Congress because we don't have enough members who care enough about this issue. When you look at even two Democrats, Manchin, of course, and of course that woman from Arizona, they don't give a darn about this issue. They would rather have the power to determine what happens in the Senate by using their 2 votes for themselves than anything else. So I would like to be optimistic. I would like to say, yes, this time something is going to happen. Nothing is going to happen until the people in the streets continue to protest and to rally, and our numbers grow, and we elect the elected officials who care about this issue.
So it was actually pretty nice to see a Democrat tell the truth about what's really transpiring within the Democratic Party. You know, she mentioned Joe Manchin by name. She was also referring to Kyrsten Sinema, and they even high-fived each other when they were at the World Economic Forum because of their insistence on protecting the legislative filibuster, which requires 60 senators to vote in favor of any legislation in order for it to pass. That's a way of killing any real reform or any real change. There's the last part of Maxine Waters' statement that I disagree with. I don't think that it's just, elect more of us and keep protesting and everything will change. I think that it goes further than that. I think that we need to change the current political system, namely getting rid of that filibuster. But one final thing I'll say, she was referring to the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which did in fact pass in the House in 2021, but it stalled in the Senate, namely because of the legislative filibuster.
Yeah, I loved seeing that. And it's interesting because when the Young Progressives came in, everybody told them, you are to never criticize Democratic colleagues. It's the worst possible thing you could do. Now, it's kind of both ironic and refreshing to see the old guard, like Maxine Waters, who's been in Congress forever, come around and go, all right, I've had enough. Yeah, it's Manchin Sinema, that's the problem. Thank you, finally. It's the most obvious thing in the world, but there was this giant media blockade. No, we have to pretend all the Democrats are angels, right? No, they could have passed that act if Manchin and Sinema had, voted the other way on the filibuster. They also could have passed voting rights. I mean, my God, they could have ended gerrymandering the whole country if Manchin and Sinema didn't pretend they care about the filibuster. Why do I say pretend? Remember, they both voted along with everybody else to lift not everybody else, but the entire Democratic Party, to lift the filibuster for a debt ceiling vote. So it's obvious they don't mind making exceptions to the filibuster, but only if it helps their donors and not if it helps black people or poor people in this country. And that's just a fact. So finally, another Democrat said it. Thank you.
The other thing that she said, which I slightly disagree with, was, when she mentions we need you guys to keep rallying, keep applying pressure, you would think that would work, but it would work in a system in which politicians aren't corrupted by corporate money, right? And by the fact that they have their own personal financial investments and care about their own wealth more than anything else. So that's part of the reason why the pressure that Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema faced during the debates over the social spending provisions in the Build Back Better agenda, it didn't move them. The pressure didn't move them at all. They didn't care. And it's because, again, they really do value their personal wealth and their campaign donations from corporations more than they do the actual constituents that they're supposed to be representing.
Does anybody ever remember why we do protests in the first place? Because now people just kind of do them thinking, well, that will eventually lead to change. But does it?
No.
So now the thing is, I love protests because I love the idea of people getting out there and being active and making a difference in a democracy. But if we're being honest, and that's the whole point of this show, they don't work anymore. The reason that they don't work is because the politicians couldn't care less. They think it's a joke. They have a big belly laugh over. It doesn't matter how many people show up, 1 million, 10 million, it doesn't matter. We had the original George Floyd protests across the country. Tens of millions of people showed up. And did we pass a bill? No, we didn't pass a bill. Did Manchin or Sinema care? Not one bit, okay? So I don't want you to get discouraged. I'm not telling you that because of that. What I'm telling you is the impact that one Democratic legislator could have is actually much larger than a 10 million person protest. Why? Because the whole point of the protest is to draw media attention. But now the media, A, doesn't care, and the politicians don't care even if the media does cover it. But when a fellow legislator says something, the entire media cares. All of a sudden, look at us. We're covering, and others too, are covering Maxine Waters' comments against Manchin and Sinema because, that's drama on Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
That's why I'm begging the progressives to fight back 10, 20, 200 times harder because it draws attention more than 10 rallies, 100 protests could. And that's the point. And once you have that attention, you have to do something with it. You have to direct it and go, this is the problem and this is how we fix it. So Maxine Waters took that first baby step there. It's a good one, and that's why we're encouraging it. But there's a lot more steps for these legislators to take so that the protests can actually have an effect again.
Absolutely, and I also want to be real about what the actual political landscape looks like when it comes to these types of issues. You do have, and the other thing is, look, she named Manchin and Sinema, but it would be a mistake to think that Manchin and Sinema are the only Democratic members of the Senate who are standing in the way of passing incredibly important reforms and legislation, right? They were the ones who were willing to name themselves, raise their hands, and be the pariahs for the progressive base. But there are other corporate Democrats who would have gladly substituted Manchin and Sinema in that fight to maintain the legislative filibuster.
Here at TYT, we work to cut through all the establishment media's biases and bring you the news from a factual and progressive viewpoint. Now allow me to introduce you to Ground News, a new tool that you can use to stay informed on what's really going on around the world. Ground News doesn't just bring you the information, it also provides you with an easy to use rating system that measures each article's political leanings, factuality, and gives you complete transparency on who owns the news that you're reading. Like today, I was on their site and I saw an article about some improvements in the ozone layer. And I was a little skeptical because good news about the climate is pretty rare these days. But with over 100 sources originating from an even spread of news organizations, I was confident that what I was reading was true. So score one for Earth. So get the whole picture and break through the corporate media agenda by subscribing to Ground News today.